Hey guys, we regularly get questions from people about the North Korean issue, what we see about North Korea, what do you think about North Korea, and what do you think is going to happen with North Korea and all that sort of thing. And topics like this, we really try and avoid them because they're just a hornet's nest, and you always end up with a whole heap of over-emotional responses and aggression and all sorts of things if you talk about topics like this, unless you say what a lot of people want you to say. And in this case, you know, the safest way to make a popular video on YouTube would be to say that North Korea is a crazy country full of crazy people and they're evil and demons and all sorts of things, and our countries are the fighters for freedom, and our countries are the good guys. So in other words, we're all the good guys, they're the bad guys. And if you made a video along those terms, probably it'd be popular, and you get lots of views and lots of support on YouTube. However, that's not what we're observing. But also, just to on that first topic, because of that, a lot of the media will say what we want them to say. So in other words, to answer the question about what we see, a lot of what we see in the media is put through that lens first of it's got to appeal to the viewer, right? They want the viewers to be happy as well. And of course, you know, in Japan, we've talked about this before, in Japan we get Japanese news, of course, and Japanese newspapers and Japanese TV news and that sort of thing, but also of course we get the same news as people outside Japan. We get access to BBC and CNN and MSNBC and everything else that you guys see, we can see too. And we get all the perspectives, you know, you got Fox and you got the other side, you got all the different points of view and perspectives and the way things are reported. But what we usually see, and particularly recently it's become a bit more of a topic, because recently North Korea's been testing ICBMs that could actually reach the US, and suddenly, because they might have weapons that could actually reach the US, suddenly it's a big deal and it's more important and that sort of thing. So we're seeing a lot of talk about that. But interestingly, you can see the bias. It's really similar to any time there's any sort of conflict like this, where they want to have the good guys and the bad guys, and we're the good guys and those guys are the bad guys. And it's the same as all the other conflicts that we've seen over the last 50 years around the world. And so what we see is, classically, what they'll say is that this week the North Koreans did another provocative action. They use the word provocative quite a lot, which is an interesting word. Provoking what? Really? Like, they're testing a missile is provoking? They're doing it to provoke a response? Right? In actual fact, a lot of the educated, like the specialists, the people around the world who know a lot about North Korea, are saying that the reason the North Koreans are doing this stuff is because they don't want to be attacked. So to suggest that they are doing these missile tests because they want to be attacked, I mean, they'd be fully aware, in the same way we've got access to all the news from the last 50 years and all the history for the last 50 years. They've got access to all that too, and they know what would happen. You know, they know what happened to Iraq when Iraq invaded Kuwait. So they know what would happen. And in actual fact, North Korea hasn't spoken of invading anybody. They've got no claims. They haven't actually invaded anybody or talked about invading anybody or bombed anybody for 60 years. Which, when you look at the good guys, if you look at the countries who consider themselves to be the good guys, you know, our countries have been bombing and killing and maiming, not Japan of course, but a lot of the other countries have been bombing and invading and killing people all over the place. But the North Koreans actually haven't. 60 years, they haven't bombed anybody, they haven't invaded anybody, and they haven't said that they want to. They don't have any claims, you know. Russia and Japan have some claims on land that they both claim, some islands, and so does China and Japan have some claims on land that they both say is theirs. But North Koreans aren't arguing that with anybody. They're not saying they want to take over anybody's land. They're not motivated to take over anybody or attack anybody or bomb anybody. So the people who do know about North Korea, and if you look a bit on the internet, look at the people, the specialists from around the world, a little bit more neutral, like some of the people from Europe and that sort of thing, who have connections with North Korea and understand the thinking. That's what they're saying, is that all it is North Korea they're scared basically that what's going to happen to them, that what happened to Iraq is what is going to happen to them. That the good guys are going to invade their country and kill their leaders, which is what happened in Iraq, isn't it? The good guys went into Iraq and strung up Saddam Hussein and killed him, and because those guys in North Korea, they saw all that too. When we were watching that on TV, they were watching it too. They know what happened there, and they'd be worried about the same thing happening to them in their country. So a lot of the people. So again, this is just observations. This is what we're seeing. This is what we're seeing, is that we're seeing these neutral people in other parts of the world, like around Europe and other parts of the world, who are specialists on North Korea, are saying that they're not threatening to attack anybody or invade anybody. They're just doing this for their own defence. Their thinking obviously is that if they have weapons that'll reach the mainland of USA, then maybe that will help protect them against getting invaded by the USA, because maybe the USA will think twice about invading if they're worried about a missile reaching their own country. And again, the North Koreans would be fully aware of how weak they actually are. When it comes to their military capability compared to a lot of the other countries around the world, they're really weak. So the chances of winning any sort of war, they'd be fully aware of that. They don't admit it to their people, of course. And again, we're fully aware too. You have to observe too how poorly the Korean people live and how poorly they're treated. And of course, we've just had some new sanctions brought in by the UN that's gonna hurt their people even more. So there's no doubt that their people are treated really poorly. But that's not really the issue at the moment, is it? The issue at the moment is that through the mainstream media, we're being told that North Korea is being provocative. We see that all the time. Every time they do a test, anything they do at all, we're seeing the words like provocative used in the media here and in the media around the world, aren't we? And then the US and Japan and other countries will do. Recently, they did an exercise with some ships and the destroyers, and maybe it was an aircraft carrier, but some battleships sailed up past North Korea. And because that wasn't called provocation in the media, that was called an exercise, right? And then recently, some US bombers and some Japan Self-Defense Force fighters flew together up past North Korea, and that was called an exercise as well. So what we're seeing is every time the good guys, right? That's us, guys. That's us. That's everybody that's not North Korean is a good guy, right? So every time the good guys do something, it's getting called an exercise or a drill, right? And every time the North Koreans do something, it's getting called a provocation. In North Korea's latest provocation, So people are asking what we're seeing. Well, this is what we're seeing. The same bias that you guys are probably seeing in your own countries, And then as far as how the Japanese people are reacting, obviously when people are constantly reading that sort of stuff and seeing that sort of stuff on TV, obviously it does concern some people. But interestingly, the people who are reacting the strongest are the ones who live near the US bases. We've seen a bit of stuff with that recently on the news, that the people who live near the US bases in Japan are getting nervous and starting to have their own sort of drills, in case the bases are attacked. And because let's face it, North Korea has no motivation to attack Japan at all. There's no reason for North Korea to attack Japan at all. There's no fight going on between the two countries. If they did send over some missiles over to Japan, they'd be aimed at the US bases, obviously. So, there's some people who are actually arguing that the US bases make Japan more of a target, which is a fair argument, really, particularly if you're living next door to one. So, so that's sort of what we're seeing. We're seeing a lot of the bias, and it just seems, if you look at it objectively, from a sort of an objective, reasonable point of view, and put yourself in the North Korean shoes. I mean, there's no doubt that the guys that are running that country are nut jobs, and there's no doubt that they treat their people really, really badly, and the people there are really suffering. Those sanctions that the UN brought in are just going to make it worse for their people. So there's no doubt that that's all a problem, you know. But the solution to strut up and down across the border, up and down, just outside the border with fighter jets and ships and to, you know, sanctions, more sanctions. What's actually happening because of this bad behaviour by the good guys, right? What's actually happening is they're making the situation worse. Whereas the obvious only way to peacefully resolve this is to have dialogue with the North Koreans and to give them, it's the stick and carrot thing, isn't it? The stick and carrot. Does you guys see that? Oh dear, oh dear. The stick and carrot thing, isn't it? I mean, they'd be much better off, you know, making offers to the North Koreans to help them, you know, to do business with them and to trade with them and do things with them in return for them maybe, you know, doing some more human rights things with their people, or, you know, sort of calm the situation down, take it in a positive direction. Because at the moment, those of you who are old enough to remember what happened before, you know, the Iraqi war and before the Afghan war will recognise this is exactly the same build-up. You know, this propaganda build-up is exactly the same propaganda build-up that we saw before those two wars. And you know, it's like these guys don't learn. It's like the leaders of the good guys don't learn from their mistakes, and they're setting up to do the same thing that they did last time. You know, we were told last time that it was you know, weapons of mass destruction last time was the excuse, wasn't it? That turned out not to exist, you know, or Afghanistan and the war against terror, which actually has only just created more terrorists and hasn't solved any problems at all. And it's sort of a bit the same with this situation there. You know, the North Koreans are just scared to death. The leaders of that country are scared to death that they're going to get invaded and they're going to get strung up. You know, obviously, it's obvious. I mean, there's no other motivation that they have for the posturing that they're doing. It's just, you know, don't you invade us, because if you invade us like you did Iraq, we might be able to reach your country with some missiles, you know. So, you know, it just seems obvious from where we're sitting and what we're seeing. This seems to be obvious. You know, if you look at it through a sort of an objective point of view, with keeping in mind what we've seen in the past in history with this sort of behaviour, that it just seems to be that they're, you know, that the best strategies are not being applied, basically, and as a result of that, it does seem to be deteriorating. But you know, it's really, really unlikely that North Korea would intentionally throw the first stone. It really is. They're not stupid, you know. And if you look at most of the military analysts agree with that. Most of the informed military analysts agree with that it's really unlikely North Korea would throw the first stone. It's more likely that if they get invaded, then they might start throwing missiles. So obviously, just going down that track, you know, the posturing and all the rest of it, it's just primitive, and it doesn't work. It hasn't worked in history. Any of you guys that have followed history would know that sort of stuff just hasn't worked in the past, and it's not going to work here. It's only going to make the situation worse. So yeah, to answer your questions, to those people who've been asking those questions, yes, yeah, we do see quite a bit of it going on in the media. Most of it's biased and propaganda based, and unfortunately it works. I mean, we know, the other reason we didn't want to make this video is we know what happens when you make a video and say something unpopular like this, because it's so much easier to believe the other way, isn't it? You know, we found this in the past. Any topic like this where you try to look at it from a different point of view always brings problems, because, you know, you make a video like saying that North Koreans evil and wicked and that we're all good guys, it's going to be a much more popular video. A video like this one we'll see people unsubscribe. You know, we've got a chart. You know, YouTube gives us a chart. If you look on your channel, channel settings page. It shows you your statistics, it shows you your subscribers, and anytime we touch a topic like this, the subscriber numbers drop straight away. There's a whole heap of people, oh, I don't like what I don't like what this guy's saying, and they unsubscribe. Or some other people will get abusive and leave abusive comments in the comment section that you won't get to see because we delete them. But yeah, really abusive, angry comments when you make a video like this, because we're saying stuff that people don't want to hear. And it's just this stuff is just observations on what we see. So of course, other people could watch exactly the same stuff and come to a different conclusion. And a lot of people do, of course. Most of the people who watch those news stories about how evil North Korea is and how good we are, and a lot of people believe that stuff because it's much preferable to believe that, isn't it? It makes you feel much better if you think you're one of the good guys and they're all the bad guys. And you know that throughout history, leaders of countries throughout history have stayed popular by doing exactly that. If you've got your country focused on other people being bad guys and us being good guys, then that's a really good way to be a popular leader, because people want to think like that. People are comfortable thinking like that. Same reason people get so emotional about their soccer team or their football team. You know, we want to believe that we're the good guys and they're the bad guys, and it's just a human nature thing, and it works. Obviously, it does work, and that's really dangerous then, because people start to believe the propaganda and they get behind it, and then all of a sudden you've got, you know, and it always seems that before these wars that they're popular with the people, and then after them people go, oh, we shouldn't really have done that. You know, you look at any sort of history documentary, in hindsight documentary, you know, about the Vietnam War or Iraq or Afghanistan, and you look at any documentary on those wars that's not propaganda based, and in hindsight it was a mistake. In hindsight, we shouldn't have done it, you know, and we do that all the time. Because at the time, everyone's going, yeah, let's go and invade them and drop bombs on them. We see this all the time too. Comments on YouTube and, you know, people making these comments. Let's bomb them, let's nuke them. You always get some idiot, let's nuke them. Let's nuke them, yeah. When we're talking about nuking them, we're talking about bombing them, we're talking about killing the innocent people. It's the lunatics that run the place that are the problem. It's not the Joe Citizen over there. You know, that's the other thing that people just seem to lose total perspective on these things when they get so emotional about it. That, you know, they're evil. Well, no, most Korean people are just like us, and they're just struggling to survive. You know, North Korean people and South Korean people come from the same history. You know, the only difference is their leader. They're leaders, you know. So the people themselves, South Korea is our ally, and North Korea is not. So why does that make the North Korean people evil just because their government's not our ally? Obviously, the people themselves are the same. The North Korean people and South Korean people are the same. Just their leaders are different. So, and they're not evil. No such thing as evil. That's something from the Bible. They're just, you know, ruthless, aren't they? They're ruthless. They want to maintain their power by controlling their people, and they don't want anybody else coming along and messing with it, you know. And of course that's not a good thing, but letting it escalate up till we start bombing people, and then, you know, to try and justify aggression against them by saying that we want to protect their people from their ruthless leaders, which is what they said in Iraq as well. Weapons of mass destruction, and also because, you know, Saddam Hussein was killing his own people. Well, yeah, but then dropping bombs on them, dropping bombs on those innocent people to save them isn't a reasonable way to go about it either, is it? So to say that, you know, the North Korean leaders are really bad and we want to save their people from this horrible regime, so let's drop bombs on the country and kill some of their people, no, that's not logical. And in hindsight, you know, if that does happen, 20 years from now, we'll be looking back going, oh, that was a mistake, obviously. You know, and the educated people, the people who study it 20 years from now would be saying, why didn't they just talk to those guys and reassure them and try and help the human rights in the country by offering them all sorts of deals? Obviously the solution, you know, obviously the country's in deep shit. They can help improve the situation in the country by doing business with the country, not by boycotting it, not by sanctions, but by actually doing business with them and help them improve things within North Korea, and in exchange for that, you know, get certain agreements which will improve the situation for the people who live there, and then they can get certain agreements from leaders as well. Not go the other way. So anyway, oh, this is a bad video to make. This is it's gonna rain down. It's gonna rain down. Okay, anyway, there it was. Those of you who've been asking for the North Korean video, there it was. More videos coming soon.